and my pleasure to be here tonight. A few weeks ago, Eddie called me to persuade me to appear here tonight. Eddie promised that you'd be a very captive crowd. After a long pause, he said he'd be locking the exit. So now here I am.
Yay.
I'm a 70-year-old has-been climber from Bakersfield. As a youth, I backpacked in the high Sierras. Those alpine high Sierras became my personal treasure. In my early 20s, I moved on from collegiate wrestling to technical rock climbing. My exposure to the world of vertical rock climbing transformed my life in many ways. So, have any of you here been to the Needles? I see hands. It's such an awesome place. If you haven't visited the Needles, it's a must-see destination whether you climb or not. These spectacular granite spires and domes, accented by enchanting yellow lichens, are the crown jewel of the Kern River climbing. I'd like to share my story from rites of passage about two novice adventure climbers at the Needles. Rock climbing in the early 70s was remarkable. The popularity of climbing and the advancement of the gear were ramping up. Decades ago, I started climbing the granite cliffs in the southern Sierra. The Needles area was the crown jewel, an esteemed destination for many world-class climbers. For me, these climbing experiences became a mental and physical paradox, juiced with adrenaline, fear, and ecstasy. Recently, I was doing a Google search, climbing at the Needles. One account was about a cracked wedge bottle that contributed to a rescue of a climber. That information really got my attention because the legend was incorrect. I know because my partner and I lived that story almost 50 years ago. That day, a person we had barely met brainstormed and executed a brilliant solo rescue that saved our butts. But this story really begins earlier when a young, free-spirited rock climber named David Peck introduced me to rock climbing. David had limited rock climbing experience, and I had none. We managed to scrounge up a sparse array of used climbing gear from dropout climbers and things from the Army surplus store. We didn't even have stoppers. Our gear rack consisted of a few wedges and chocks from older European climbing companies, and nothing would fit a crack larger than 2.5 inches. One of the most essential items I bought on my slim budget at that time was a used Kermantle rope. David's climbing attire consisted of some Bohemian threads and Royal Robbins Yosemite boots. For me, I climbed in a new pair of EBs and some leather knickers I scored at a garage sale. We were weekend warriors, doing our own thing, climbing established routes, the Kern Slabs, Owl Rock, Parker Bluff, and we even attempted a couple of routes at the Needles. Later, David and I approached the Upper Needles, a 2.5-mile trail that started at the road's end. The trail ended at the lookout tower atop Magician Needle. Earlier, all our climbs had been done from the lower Needles, hiking from a road. There we met Linda Adams, a fire watch attendee with the Forest Service, and her boyfriend, John Newman. John was a climber, and he suggested that we climb the Yellow Brick Road, a route on the Witch Needle. Yellow Brick Road ascends via very quintessential needles climbing like face, off-width, thin sprinter crack, and an overhang. all in 2 or 3 pitches. After we checked the handwritten topo kept in a binder stored in the lookout, we decided, hey, let's climb it. Being naive about wide cracks, we were clueless that we hadn't the gear to protect such a climb. Undaunted, we proceeded from the base of the lookout stairway, headed down the climber's trail, and then third class to the base of the route. Yeah, we were pretty stoked. Both of us tied into the ends of the rope because at that time we didn't have climbing harnesses. We used a bowline and a coil. David racked up the gear and started leading the pitch, while I gave him a hip belay. Higher up, he started flailing and yelling about his boot getting stuck deep within the off-width crack. He looked desperate and gripped, trapped in the crack with his last protection below him. I thought about my options. I couldn't just leave my soul partner there. Our situation was desperate with no solutions. Seemingly, no alternatives. David was anchored to nothing except his solidly planted boot, belayed me so I could climb up to assist him. Soon, I stood in an A-tray off his last piece of protection and wrestled to free that boot to no avail. I couldn't free that damn Royal Robbins boot. Much time passed while I continued to struggle to extricate him from the crack. Then John appeared overhead. John had heard our pleas for help and assessed our predicament. He rappelled down from the summit with a bottle of dish soap. After giving the boot a thorough soaking, John was able to dislodge it from the crack. John returned to the summit and offered his rope to bring us up. Thank God he belayed us up to safety. Next, we set up a rappel anchor and knotted our ropes together. After some manly hugs, we each rappelled singly down the adjacent notch between the spires. This humbling experience weighed heavily on David and I as we hiked out of the needles. Thinking back, David and I were really a mess. We climbed together for only a couple of years with more self-inflicting, harrowing experiences on ourselves due to our lack of experience. However, by the end of our climbing partnership, we had paralleled routes on Voodoo Dome, Watchtower, Morro Rock, in obscurity. We just wanted to climb and never thought to report them, adventures that David and I could appreciate. At some point, David gravitated to San Francisco, where he promoted and managed potential high-level politicians. As for me, I stuck around and was able to hook up with some fantastic and solid climbers by hanging out at Bigfoot Mountaineering in Bakersfield. I was lucky. That network was a total game changer. I continued to climb in the Southern Sierra on and off for about 20 years. In closing, I suggest if you ever climb the Yellow Brick Road and notice that tattletale bottle and dish soap laying deep inside the off-width crack, you might want to ponder your situation.
You ever talk to Royal Robbins about that?